was a smaller house, but that was okay because I had this very large detached garage
Right.
that was going to be my workshop and studio space and a place to host homeschool, like co-op classes,
Wow.
art classes, sensory classes.
Yeah, yeah.
That was kind of my vision for the property. We were going
Right.
to do like an outdoor kind of nature playground too, that
Hmm.
that my kids wanted to help, kind of build.
Create,
And
yeah.
yeah, the
Wow.
best laid plans. We moved in, actually like the very end of July, early August, right before the hurricane.
Okay.
So we had moved out of the city looking for a house. We had put in offers on like 12 different properties because that was a crazy time
12, yeah, that was.
to buy houses. And then we finally got this house, and we were so excited to
Yeah.
set up some roots. We were coming out of a very toxic situation. And so this was kind of going to be our sanctuary space.
Mm.
I had just gotten the kids' bedrooms put together finally, and they all had their own little nests.
Yeah.
And then the hurricane came, so we actually ended up living in a hotel
Oh,
for almost 2.5 years.
yeah.
So thankfully my children happened to be on vacation. And I'm so grateful because, like I said, this is kind of after a bit of childhood trauma. This house was supposed to be our safe
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
So they were away, and I happened to drive to the middle of Pennsylvania for less than 24 hours to pick up the rest of our things to bring
Okay.
back. So
Right.
the dog was with me. And while I was there visiting with my parents, we saw on the news, and I wasn't familiar enough with the area to be like, oh, that's where my house is, or because we had just moved here.
Right,
We're still
yeah,
getting our
yeah.
just the more I saw on the news, the more I was like, I think that might be the creek in the back of our
Oh my
house,
God.
and like, oh well, if something really bad would happen, I'm sure somebody would call me. It was literally, I was gone for 18 hours, if that. It was like a quick overnight, and we're coming back. By the time I came back, the roads were pretty clear, so my parents were like, well, call us if you need anything,
Right.
we'll be there. And I'm driving, there was like nothing, there was no backup, there was no like detour or anything, so I'm thinking, okay, like I'm in the clear.
Yeah.
And then I first started in the garage. I tried to open the door and I couldn't.
Mm.
And I was like, I had to like pound it open. And even then it opened a crack, but I had to like peek in and through.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my goodness. So we were basically using the garage as a storage.
Right.
Like we hadn't moved everything
Yeah,
into the
yeah.
house yet. We were
Yeah.
like piece by piece.
Okay.
But I tried to open the door and peer around, and everything was just everywhere. It had, like floated around and just like toppled over and then came back. Nothing in there was salvageable. So the garage had about 7.5 feet of water in it.
7.5 feet.
Yeah.
I was wondering how high it had risen.
Yeah, there's like
7.5 feet.
kind of an indicator on the garage door because there was like a little bit of kind of like
You
sediment.
could see it, yeah.
Yeah, they could kind of see the line.
Yeah.
And the house probably had about 2.5 feet of water in it.
Wow. 24 hours.
Within 24 hours, it had risen, it had gone, and it had done its damage.
Wow.
Yep. So everything in the house, like things were toppled over. There was like mud. It just looked like mud everywhere. The realization of like, I just worked so hard to get a safe place for my kids.
Yeah. Oh.
And they just got set up and just like, what would this do to their little hearts,
Yeah.
And just so much community and friends showed up for us. They traveled 45 minutes to an hour to be here and help
Yeah.
me muck out, basically.
Wow.
We got a huge dumpster, like the biggest one that they could possibly get. And
Yeah.
we just tossed everything.
Yeah.
I was like cooking on a griddle,
Oh.
like something I could plug in. So I was like doing that. I had like a panini press and a microwave, and that's basically what our meals consisted of. So, you kind of find ways to get creative whenever you
Oh, yeah.
apartment.
Yeah.
It had a little kitchenette.
Yep.
It has a stovetop, not an oven, but we got an air fryer, so we were
Yeah.
able to still make birthday cakes and, cook dinner fully and take warm baths and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And we ended up there for like 2.5 years before we were able to move back into our house.
So,
It was so hard, but also such a good reminder. You know, like I told you at the beginning of the story, that our stuff was more than stuff for my
Yeah.
children.
yeah,
But in a way that all of that stuff was part of our own life,
yeah,
and I couldn't purge it because of their sentimental attachment to it.
Right.
And this was like nature's way of saying, no,
Yeah.
you need
you
a
need to
fresh
get rid-
slate.
Yep.
And so it did that, and I could not be blamed for that. And it showed us that we really don't need that much. That home is really wherever we are together, whether that be
Yep.
a one-bedroom hotel room or a two-bedroom hotel room. You know, that we were still able to stay in connection with our
Yeah.
people and our communities, and still make memories and create joy together.
Yeah.
So it was a good learning experience as much as it was a traumatic one. But I think
Tell
I
me
really
about-
needed to learn that it was okay to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
It was okay to accept help.
Yep.
And I was put in a position where I couldn't just rely on them. I had to accept help from other people,
Yeah.
from strangers.
Yeah,
And it was a beautiful thing, you know, to not be part of this community at all
yeah,
and to have strangers show up.
wow,
Yeah, I think that was the biggest takeaway for me, was like, it's okay. So I'm always the person that helps other people and
Yeah.
without problem, you know, and
Yeah.
I feel honored when I get to do that. And
sure,
yet I don't allow that so often in my life.
Yeah.
And so this was a good reminder that it's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything other than, you know, we all help each other. And
that's right, yeah,
and this experience forced me to find my voice again
yeah,
and to use it loudly in a way that I've never used it before. Because advocating through all of these systems is a full-time job in and of itself.
yeah, I can
Trying to
imagine.
access the resources that are supposed to be
Yeah.
available to you, but unfortunately, the system itself makes it very hard to access
Yeah,
and creates barriers every step of the way. Whether it's like, oh, you never sent that in. Yes, clearly I did. I have the documentation that says
Mhm.
I did. Well, you need to send it in again.
yeah,
And then it's like, oh, but you need to send it in now with like an updated version attached in addition to that other stuff. You know, so there's just like jumping through all of these different
Yeah.
hoops. And most people would give up just
Yeah.
because they don't have the energy to do it.
right,
And so I think that was a huge lesson for me, is the advocacy. So not
Yeah.
only finding my voice, but learning to use it, and then also sometimes having to scream a little bit in order to make some noise, which was a very uncomfortable thing for
Yeah.
me, but
Yeah.
a good learning experience also. The township had reached out to me very early on, and I really was like, I barely took the phone call because I don't answer phone calls unless I know who's
Yeah.
calling for safety reasons. But they were persistent. I don't know if they had showed up or something, but they
Right.
were like, hey, we want you to sign this paperwork. And it had to do eventually with the grant, with the buyout.
right,
So the fact that they were already kind of on it and
Yeah.
advocating in that way
Yeah.
at a federal level
yeah,
was very helpful. That they
Yeah.
were reaching out to homeowners.
Yep.
You know, I can't really speak highly enough of Aaron. He caught a lot of my big feelings, even if they weren't. And I told him, please don't take this personally. I'm not trying to direct this at you. I'm just frustrated with the systems.
Yeah.
And he totally understood that. And he
Yeah.
said, you know, anytime you need to vent, anytime you need to talk, you know,
yep,
he was okay with that.
that's awesome, yeah,
And it felt really good. It felt like I had somebody in my
Yeah,
corner.
yeah.
And in a time like that,
yep.
having
You need
somebody in your corner
corner.
feels, yeah, it feels like magic. So